Alright, let's get back to some of that early 90s pornographic rape murder simulator gaming goodness that's gonna ruin the minds of the nation's youth with Night Trap 25th Anniversary. This game is now a quarter of a millennia old. I remember when it came out. Night Trap, originally released in the early 90s on the Sega CD, has a long turbulent history before it even came out. And after it did come out, it has a long turbulent history of being some type of pornographic rape murder simulator. Is any of that true? No, not in the slightest. Compared to today's standards, Night Trap is tame. You see worse things on Nickelodeon nowadays. So for those of you that have never played Night Trap, what's Night Trap all about? Night Trap is a full motion video game, or an FMV. FMVs were huge in the early and mid 90s. This is back in a time when graphics for the most part were pixels, 8-bit and 16-bit. So seeing actual live action video in a video game was something of a big deal. A whole slew of games came out in the FMV genre, a lot of which were on the Sega CD, but also on the CDI, 3DO, and the PC. While this genre exploded onto the scene back in the early 90s, like a lot of things that oversaturate a market, it eventually crashed and fell apart, and now the genre as a whole has a really bad rap. FMV games are thought of as mostly corny, badly acted movies centered around simplistic gameplay that usually has to do with timing. And Night Trap's no different. While yes, the acting in the game is corny as hell, it's also extremely charming and very reminiscent of a time that wasn't quite so stuck up. Ain't no Oscar contenders here, but it's still a really good time. The story centers around a group of girls and one boy who go to a slumber party at a house that's owned by a family that maybe has some nefarious motives. While at the house, a group of monsters known as Augs infiltrate the home and terrorize the girls. It's your job as the player to monitor the surveillance feeds at the house and catch the monsters before they get the girls. If you play the game from beginning to end as a whole, it's only about 25 to 30 minutes. You switch between a view of 8 different rooms, and in these rooms the same thing happens at each time with each playthrough. The idea is to catch as many of the monsters as you can before letting the house get overrun. Every now and then one of the occupants will be placed in a dangerous situation, and at what time you have to come in and intervene with your traps to save that person and not end the game. If you fail at these moments, the game in most cases will end immediately. If you fail to trap too many of the monsters throughout the game and the home becomes overrun, you fail the game as well. And that's it. That's really the basic premise of Night Trap. Not a lot to it, it's pretty simple, but it is fun. It's a good time. So what's new about this new version of Night Trap 25 years later? There have been a slew of versions of Night Trap throughout the years. The game got ported over to pretty much anything that would handle it in the mid to late 90s. But none of them come close to how good this version looks. Back in the day, the original version was super grainy, and if you look back at it now, it's almost hard to make out a lot of details and a lot of things that are going on in the game. Now, everything is as crisp as it possibly can be. There is an option, however, within the new 25th anniversary to revert it back to its original gameplay look. While I don't recommend ever playing it this way, it's a neat little option. Also different in this version, which is probably the biggest addition of all, is the thumbnails or tiles that you use to navigate to the different rooms and the different cameras. Originally, it was just 4 little blocks that had a name of the particular room, be it bedroom, living room, kitchen, etc. Now it actually shows a live feed video of what's going on there. In the original version, you pretty much had to play it with a pen and paper next to you and write down the different times and the room that things would happen so that you could make sure you were there at that time with the in-game counter so that you could catch the monsters. In this one, you actually have a live video of all the rooms right there on the screen at one time, and you can see what's going on in the room even if you're not in the room. This new relatively small addition to the game really takes a lot of the chance out of it. There's still a little bit, but it becomes less of a game of chance, and it does actually add a level of skill to the game. Managing what you're looking at and what you're observing at any given time, you don't so much have to memorize the times and places where the monsters will be, as keep a close eye on all those little tiles to see when the scene changes and something's actually happening in said room. Besides the resolution of the video, this is probably the single biggest addition to this version of the game. And it does change the way you play the game a bit and make it so much more enjoyable. Besides that, the actual core game of Night Trap is pretty much the same one you remember playing 25 years ago. There's a couple of extra scenes added in that were deemed too graphic for the day. They're not. But beyond those couple of shots, there's not much else different, except everything's just a lot prettier and much more streamlined. So does that alone make the game worth it? Maybe, depending on who you are, but there's so much more to this title. The special features, or as it's called on the title screen, the basement, is one of the coolest little additions to this version as well. There's a slew of documentaries, videos, still shots, and just information that are really interesting, especially to the history of this game and the history of video games as a whole in the early to mid 90s. A lot changed with video games in the 90s, such as the development of the ESRB rating system that all games share now. You find out that this game was one of the main contributors as to why that rating even came about. Even if you're not usually into that kind of thing, these documentaries and all the information you have at your disposal here is extremely interesting, and you'll probably enjoy it. There's another really cool feature in this game, and that is the test game that they made leading up to this game. When they were developing this game, they made a game called Scene of the Crime. It's only about 5 minutes long, but it's pretty much the forebearer to Night Trap. It's really hokey and corny and nowhere near as developed as Night Trap. It's really neat that this little internal test game is finally seeing the light of day. As far as I know, this is the first time that anyone has ever had an opportunity outside of the developers to play this. And while it's not the greatest game in the world for sure, it is an awesome special feature and totally worth the few minutes it takes to play it and see where this all started. Overall, Night Trap 25th Anniversary is a great piece of gaming history and a really good game all around. Night Trap and the FMV genre as a whole have a really bad rap, but there is some fun to be had here. Is it corny? Is it terribly acted? Yeah, but that's what they were setting out to do. It's supposed to be that way. It's really campy fun. It has a campy charm that very few games or movies have nowadays. So is Night Trap worth your money and time? If you played the original and you were a fan even in the slightest, yeah. Night Trap is going to be worth the $20 asking price. The game could quite possibly send you into nostalgic overload. If you weren't a fan of the original Night Trap or the FMV craze, this one's probably not going to change your mind. It might, especially the special features with all the information concerning the genre and the gaming industry as a whole at that time. They're really interesting even if you're not into this kind of game. But as far as the game, not a lot of it has changed. It's pretty much the same exact game. So if you didn't like it then, you're probably not going to like it now. Let's be real. If, like a lot of people, you never had an opportunity to play Night Trap, I encourage you to go in with an open mind and give it a shot. It is what it is. Understand what Night Trap is from the get-go and go in and have a good time, and you'll probably find some enjoyment here. So for fans, yeah, worth the $20 price tag for sure. If you're not a fan, catch it when it's on sale. So worth a buy? In my opinion, yes. So there it is, guys. Night Trap, 25th Anniversary Edition. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, hit that subscribe button and give me a like. If you didn't, let me know in the comments below why. I really appreciate you guys watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.
Come on, Sarah, what's the first thing you think of? Party!
How can you not like this awesomeness?
Breaking contact.